I'll tell you this about your podcast. So your podcast went from a fun to listen to thing to like I practically watch it live. Like the moment it drops, like
That's a fan.
yeah. Like
Well, I mean, the nice thing with the podcast is that honestly, like as you're saying, there's so much happens. And some weeks it feels like a year of AI news. And it's honestly like really hard to keep up with because the stuff we talk about is sometimes the obvious things, but like I'm reading like 3 to 5 AI research papers a week. You're filing hundreds. Like it never turns off. Like you're just always kind of trying to process what's happened and what does it mean and what are the other people saying. And so the beauty of the podcast, and you guys know this with podcasts, like it's a forcing function to synthesize that information once a week. Because before we switched to that format last fall, we would just share it between ourselves and like pass it around and maybe we'd turn it into a blog post. But the podcast gave us the forcing function to say, no, once a week, we're going to stop and pick the 3 most important things. Then we're going to throw the rest into rapid fire. So, I mean, I'm glad to hear it's of value to other people. It honestly is a bit selfish. Like it's of enormous value to me and to Mike because it forces us each week to take stock of what's going on and what that means moving forward.
Oh, I think that's true for anyone who teaches anything, right? Nobody runs up learning curves faster than content marketers because you got to teach that thing. Yeah. Especially if you're publicly, I mean, the fear of public failure is an insanely powerful motivator. So, how'd you learn GA4, Andy? I had a deadline, and everyone was going to see it, and enough people read it. I would have been embarrassed. So, yeah, I think that's the best way to learn something is to teach and commit to teaching something you don't know yet, and you will learn it very quickly. But thanks for all the synthesis. It's a great service the way you're putting it all together for us because we need a filter like you. So thank you.
Yeah, and I hope it comes across as like unbiased as possible. Like some of the stuff gets tricky, especially when we get into like AI regulation and things like that, and involvement in politics and election cycles. Yep. Because it's like, I mean, we did an episode, it was episode like 48 or 49, that was all AI regulation because there had been like 4 meetings in Washington the previous week with Congress and the White House where they were trying to work on regulation and copyright issues and stuff. And I just remember on like Saturday telling Mike, like the whole episode next week has to be this. Like I don't really want to do it, but like we have to do something deep here. And I remember the moment I sent it to him, I was like, I regret this already because the reality was I knew generally what was happening, but I realized like this was going to be like cramming for a finals in college. Like I basically committed my entire Sunday to going deep into all 4 of the hearings. What were they about? Who were the players involved? So that by Monday morning when we record, I could talk from as authoritative a perspective as I could possibly do. But then I preface is like, listen, we're not the experts on this. I am not in Washington. And so it's like, sometimes you're just trying to help people get further along, but without trying to necessarily take a side. And the regulation obviously has been one where people are always asking me, like, what do you think? What's the problem? And so, yeah, it's good. I mean, there's lots to talk about for sure.